It's a real pleasure for me to welcome Daler here tonight. We've known each other since I started in AKDN about 8 years ago. The first grant that our team secured was for one of the cross-border transmission lines in Norway, and we have worked, or from Norway, and we have worked with Pamir Energy and in that region ever since. I think it's important to understand that the work that Daler is going to talk about tonight is one piece of a much larger picture that started about 25 years ago with Focus's and AKDN's initial engagement in Tajikistan at the time of the Civil War. And it started with humanitarian assistance, food security, really literally delivering food to people's homes so that they didn't starve in the winter. But has grown into really a multi-sector development program that spans health, education, livelihoods, natural resource management, agriculture, and energy. A few weeks ago, a number of you joined us at the AKF Walk and Run. That supported a project to help 75,000 Tajiks get water and sanitation. Also a crucial, vital need for that region. We talked at the last session that we had here with the CEO in India about the importance of water and sanitation to human health. And that's just one part, I think, of that story. And so the AKF Walk and Run, which focused on water and sanitation in Tajikistan, is now we're talking about another aspect of development, which is energy provision. One of the things that you'll hear Daler talk about is how energy has really important impacts on health, on education, and on women's empowerment. And so there's a bit of a theme connecting the events that we've brought together for you this year. And without any further delay, I will let Daler tell the story.
Matt, thank you for you and for your team for organizing this event. It's great to be here today and speak to the Global Jamal, and in fact the UK Jamaat, as well as the Aga Khan Foundation for UK, it's actually our champion. What we learned that development is about team efforts. And with such a wonderful team, we wouldn't be able to achieve and try to implement to the possible extent the vision of Maulana Hazir Imams. Today, I'm also very glad to see, familiar faces. So some of them happens to be our customers. So if I don't tell the whole story, I am sure they will help me to fool those stories. Yeah, indeed. I think the context is very important. Aga Khan Development Network has decided to work in Tajikistan, particularly in East Tajikistan, where most of the Tajik Jamaat lives, which represents, in terms of territory, 47% of Tajikistan, and in terms of population, it's about 4%. Prior Pamir Energy, just give you the ideas, only 13% of population of Badakhshan had a 12 hours power supply. And those are mainly people in Kharog. In the regions, we normally didn't have electricity in winter. So it was really the crisis. And the reasons of this crisis that during the Soviet time, the region was heavily subsidized. And when it comes to the electricity, the Soviet government, what they have done, they brought lots of, and it was very easy to do it, to bring the diesel generators. Of course, at that time was coal and other energy resources were heavily subsidized. So it was actually there. And after the collapse of the Soviet Union, we got to the energy crisis simply because over 60% of the generation capacity in East Tajikistan based on diesel generation. And therefore, we only had a few hydropower plants. The infrastructure was very critical. There was no enough financing to rehabilitate the aging facilities. unfortunately, we got into the civil war. So the 5-year civil war also got its own priorities, and it was very, very difficult to continue with providing the electricity. Between 1992 and until 2005, when the problem of electricity has been addressed, we lost 70% of our trees. I cannot call it forest. You know, while I was landing in London, I could see lots of green. So we have few trees, but we lost 70% of trees at that time. So the life was really tough in this regards. But you know, you always have to start with things. So in 1995. Maulana Zirman's first time visited Tajikistan, and one of the things that have been identified as a priority is obviously to address the energy crisis. And as a part of the public-private partnership, you know, Pamir Energy was established. What it means, the government of Tajikistan has handed over its assets in the East Tajikistan to a private sector, to Pamir Energy Company. And that company has been established by Aga Khan Fund for Economical Development, which owns the 70% of the share, and then another development partner office was International Finance Corporation, which is part of the World Bank group. That partnership, and I should say that, as I said in early development, it's about team efforts. Without this partnership, it wouldn't be possible. The government of Tajikistan has really supported that project by all means, and we certainly had a very generous development partners, and ultimately the community who also appreciates the basic services that have been receiving from that project. So it's that partnership and the joint efforts that help to address the energy crisis. And today, 96% of population of Vilayat Mukhtar Kohistan and Badakhshan, which is known as a GBAO in east of Tajikistan, have an uninterrupted power supply. We are also very proud that since 2008 we have started to export electricity into Afghanistan. Today, some 4% of the population, it's 35,000 people, who receive also the electricity in Afghanistan. And I would say this is the most reliable and the most affordable electricity in Afghanistan nationwide. And this has happened just on the other side of the rivers. I guess I will stop there. And
great. Well, now we have, I think, an orientation to what is Pamir Energy. And I thought that I would ask Daler to tell us, start off by telling us a little bit about himself first, and then we can explore a little bit more of the Pamir Energy story. But Daler, let's start with you. I mean, tell us a bit about yourself. You were born in Korog, and you were born and raised in Korog, and then got your education there. I mean, tell us a little bit about your early life.
Oh yeah, thank you. Indeed, I was born and grew up in Kharog, in Gorno-Badakhshan, during the Soviet time. So then, after leaving the schools, actually I was very much influenced by my uncle, who encouraged me to proceed with the education in engineering. So I got my electric engineering in Dushanbe. I studied, and after graduating from the university, continued to work in Dushanbe for many years, and I'm very pleased that a good friend of mine happens to be my boss in the past. John Humphreys is here, so I worked for International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Society for several years, and then also worked at some time when I think lives get better in Tajikistan, so moved from the humanitarian aid into the development, worked with the World Bank, with the US USAID in promoting the small, medium enterprises. And at some stage, I felt that I'm not enough competitive. So I decided to continue with my studies, studied in the United States for 1.5 years. And actually, after graduating from the university, I came back home and joined the Focus Humanitarian Assistance. I was in charge of Focus activities in Tajikistan for the short period of time. And in 2007, in February, when again Gorno-Badakhshan got into the energy crisis, where the biggest power plant in the region was flooded. In November, it was one of the coldest time, and at this time I was helping the Jamaat with mobilizing the resources in order to address the humanitarian crisis. And it was 2007 when AKDN management has decided that I should move to Pamir Energy as a crisis manager together with the team trying to resolve the problems.
Well, so let me back up a little bit then before you joined Pamir Energy. So during the Civil War was the time that you were working for the Red Cross and the Red Crescent, or that was when you were in school?
Correct.
And then afterwards, let's say after the Civil War was when you went and worked for the World Bank, worked for USAID, continued your education, and then came back. Can you tell us a little bit about that period, right? Because when you were growing up, for example, you had power in Korog. So tell us a little bit about life then, and then kind of what you came back to after you had gone away.
Well, indeed, it was. Well, first of all, it was my childhood, and no matter where you live, the childhood is the best time of the life. Certainly, parents took care of us, and it was a region which was again heavily subsidized. I mean, I wouldn't say that there was lots of choices. Life was very simple, but it was stable. It was simple and stable. And in this part of the world, the education, I guess, was the main drivers of to further improve the lives. Yeah. So the social code put the children very much under the huge pressure to study and to study. Our parents made us study, but they didn't tell us which profession to go with. That was the time which people still have a tendency to study there, and then once they go into the university or into other jobs, try to live out of Gorno-Badakhshan. And as a result, significant part of the Jamaat is out of that place. So I had been 15 years out of Gorno-Badakhshan. Well, I have been traveling often back to home, but after coming back after 15 years, deciding to move with the family and living in Kharo, that was significant changes. On one hand, there was lots of economical activities where you could see trades, you could see lots of local entrepreneurs, you could see more variety on the markets, but still, the basic services, we were struggling with providing the basic services as the electricity. And that became a bottleneck at that time in order to bring more investment. And the investment, we could look, first of all, the government of Tajikistan continues very actively, and I would say aggressively, invest in the public services, and certainly encouraging to bring the foreign direct investment as well. And by the way, the Pamir Energy is the first foreign direct investment of that scale that brought, which came and the main goal was to ensure that we have the basic services that will lay out the foundations for the sustainable growth of all region.
I mean, I think that point you make about stability is so important. I mean, here you describe it very well. Life had been simple but stable. And then all of a sudden, the kind of rug is swept out from under these communities. And it's no longer stable. You don't have access to power. You've got a highly educated group of people. It must have been quite, well, destabilizing and difficult. And so then, at a certain point, when did the idea to invest and create Pamir Energy to address that issue? How did that come about?
Indeed, again, the whole ideas came in late 90s during the crisis. And actually, people who were involved within the AKDN and ACFED, when they're told about the story how the Pamir Energy was developed, is that our financial guru in ACFED, ACFED stands for Aga Khan Fund for Economical Development, the speaker made the presentation, but it's economical wing of AKDN, which makes money. So we always have a joke like we make money, Pamir Energy doesn't, but then Aga Khan foundations, people like Med spend those money. So in ACFED, there were, financial guru. They did run the model, and they said that Pamir Energy will never work. It will never be sustainable. So they decided to go to Maulana Zimam and say that, it doesn't work. Maybe we'll hand it over to Aga Khan Foundation and let them, subsidize it.
Thanks a lot.
But Maulana Zimam was very clear, and the guidelines was that the Pamir Energy should be a model that should bring, develop the local know-how, and this local know-how should be a model of bringing sustainable energy into the remote areas, such as East Tajikistan and North Afghanistan, North Pakistan. It's interesting that that model has been now replicating in Brazil by the World Bank and in Nepal as well. So, the time, it's very important to say that it was a tough time. There was a crisis. And we again were in an environment that was historically subsidized. Yeah? So that social mind was there. We were struggling or dealing with the stereotypes like electricity should be free or at least cheap. Yeah, so we often heard that, look guys, the water is there. And by the way, Tajikistan is among top 10 countries with the highest hydro potential per capita. So community said that, look, the water is there, you don't pay for water, water goes into the turbine and this is the electricity, why should we pay you? So that was that was kind of the notion into this one. And as we have started to do, I would say that it was start failure on our side. It's where all the assets were in the critical conditions. There was no enough financing to rehabilitate. People didn't pay the bills. And it was on a very, very low rate, even at that time. So initially the investment went into the increasing the generation capacity, which we have done. However, it was not enough because the old systems collapsed. And the old system was critical. If you look at the ACFED projects, we are very much into the generation only. We do produce, but when the feasibility study actually confirmed that the old cycle is struggling, so in order to make the model right, you go through all the cycle, and therefore, even initially we went into the into the generation. We actually continued with bringing efficiencies to the transmission and distribution. Simple things like put the meters for everybody, so to make it transparent. I think it's a good example when the Imam had financing of $8.2 million, leverage, as we talk to you, 53 million US dollars. So it's not only the Imam at Malmin, but it's how that private investment make the case and bring other resources. And this morning I had a meeting with Matt, and he said that actually we will do this 53 million to $80 million. So from the finance point of view, this money are gone. Maulana Imams expect from us the dividends in terms of better life of the people. We have never paid those dividends, but what was important to maintain the facilities and the level, the tariffs that enable people to have access to the affordable electricity, and B, the utility could meet its operational and financial cost, which is actually happening.
So I think that issue of it being a model is so important, and also the fact that His Highness really made a visionary and catalytic investment in something that at the very beginning nobody thought would work. I mean, you just said, if I understood right, you inherited it, essentially it was broken, nothing was working or wasn't working well, it didn't have any money, and nobody would pay. And yet, he decided, we're going to make this investment and make it work, and then has, through that example, brought in, 53 million more dollars of investment and partners once you were able to make it work. And so I think that model and that example has been very, very important, certainly for our work at the Aga Khan Foundation, in getting other organizations to look at that part of the world and to realize that actually development can work. I think we have a stereotype oftentimes that you'll read maybe in the Daily Mail that development is about a waste of money. And I think here you have a very good example of how development, really patiently done, thoughtfully done, can actually lead to much greater, as you say, social returns. So if we could talk just a little bit about that. So His Highness has made this investment. It's not into something that really was a failing utility because of a crisis situation. Early on, what was the first thing that what were some of the first things that had to happen? I mean, the big challenge was, I guess, getting it fixed. And that's when you came on.
I think, no, indeed. This project has lots of stakeholders. So you have stakeholders on the national level, the government of Tajikistan, and then on the regional level you have the local government, you have the community, you have the development partners. So each stakeholder has its own expectations and roles and understanding of the first public-private partnership. Between the first 5 years of the activities, as you trying to transform the historically making utility companies into the normal commercially based companies, that's difficult. I think the accident, maybe many of you heard, back in February 2007. This was turnaround point where I think everybody understood.
Tell us what exactly was the accident. It was a flood, but what happened to the...
Actually, it was February 2017. We had a severe cold winter, which created lots of what we call the fragile ice. And that anomal cold weather shut down actually our biggest power plant, which is 70% of our capacity. What happened, one of the turbines went out of the operation, and the old water which was in the basin and the tunnel, it's flooded the old power plant. So the power plant was under the water, as simple as that. And it was winter. It was very cold. Until then, because company tried to, make people pay, tried to increase the tariffs in order to make them work financially. People were resisting to pay because they felt that the quality of the services was not enough. It's still one of the less developed region of the country and of the region as such. On the other hand, the government, regional government, had lots of expectations from that project. We appreciate that the political agenda required to fix the problem as soon as possible. And then on the other hand, we had a demotivated staff where, you could see them how, they spend significant part of their time to build that power plant. And it was very difficult period for them to see that what they have done for decades is under the water. So this is what was the situation. I think that was the time that everybody said, stop playing games. Let's sit together and discuss. And we as a company started with going into the community, because what we realized that the community felt that we are foreign company, even though today 100% of the staff are local, yeah? So we went back to the community and we said that, look, this company is for you. It's a public-private partnership. Government fully support that project. The Imamat is the major shareholder of that project. So let's talk and let's fix the problem. And we started simply to have meetings with the communities. And we were amazed that in 90% of the cases, their inquiries and questions were about what we have to do as a utility anyway. Oh, fix the transformer, change the pole, change the conductors, improve the quality of the service, put the meters, make the billing systems understandable and transparent. And we took the notes, and we always had one term. So that we will take it, and depends on the problems. Sometimes it requires 2 weeks or 2 months or 3 months. And we said that we'll be back to you in 2-3 months, and we will have a talk again and see what happened. We had only one term. You have to pay your bills. And of course, at the beginning, it was not easy. As community saw that we have been delivering what we promised, things started to change. Suddenly, people start to have electricity over winter. Yeah, they could see that the quality of electricity is good. They could see that we started to put the meters, and it's as transparent today as that all the bills now going through the mobile phones. This is what, by improving the quality of services, we increased the willingness to pay. So there's one thing, the affordability, and another thing is willingness to pay. At that time, we felt that willingness to pay was a problem because the government of Tajikistan, together with a development partner, the Swiss government, the Swiss Economic Cooperation Office, they have provided the customer support scheme. That customer support schemes help the family with the lowest income to have affordable electricity. So the poverty line is at the range of 35-36%. However, about 68% of the population receive this customer support scheme, and they pay in winter in average of $1.2 per month. If you look at the average annual bill, it is $77 per year. So that was one thing to make sure that we address the issue of affordability, but then it was the willingness to pay. And
so tell us a little bit more about this customer support scheme, because it's one thing to say, there are certain people that they didn't want to pay because the service wasn't any good, which is sort of fair enough. That improves. And then there's a certain group of people who just simply can't afford to pay.
Correct.
And so tell us a bit more about the program that you've innovated to work with them in order to help them pay what they could. Because there's kind of an interesting scale, and it might be, the audience might find it interesting to know how that works, because it's pretty hard to administer usually.
Indeed. So I think one of the major problems was to increase the tariffs in the first 10 years of the projects by 4 times. And 15% each year. That was the most significant. And the first 10 years, subsidies went to everybody. So no matter what was the incomes, it was received. Later on, we came up with a targeted customer support scheme where it's the consumption which identified who could receive those supports. But even though the number of the customers who receive the support actually reduced by twice, the amount of support that came from that scheme was much higher. So that people, if you look today, it's very much have been covered. But of course, there were people who didn't want to pay. And some of those people who had an issue with the quality, which we have addressed and fixed, but there's some people, they were just tough. Yeah? So you are dealing with a community who have low incomes, and you speak their language, but when there's communities, or some of the members of this community seems to be tough, and they only understand that language. So we have to be tough with those people, and it was as simple as hostage people. It was as simple as to disconnecting, fighting. There was shooting in the air. We had to go through it. We had to stand such pressures, and this was at that time. Today, even though we are providing the lowest tariffs, we're providing electricity with the lowest tariff in the world, we believe that that tariff is sufficient in order to make sure that every single household has access to this affordable electricity, but also was as important for us to meet our operational and financial costs. Most of the assets are 40, 50 years old. Only today, in the first 15 years of our operations, we only rehabilitated 1/3 of it. So we have a very ambitious plan that in the next 10 years, we're gonna to rehabilitate 2/3 of it. Because the concession agreement will be finished in 2027. It's the shareholder visions to hand over back into the government or to any other successor of this concession, so that the utility won't fall apart the next day, but it could provide the critical and basic services to the Jamaat in the next 10 to 20 years.
And so tell us then about, you said originally folks weren't necessarily willing to pay, but now people do pay. And in fact, you say you're not making money, but you're not doing too poorly.
Oh, absolutely. The last 9 years, the collection rate is 100%.
100% collection rate?
Well, it actually can be 101 or 102%. And somebody else that, are you overcharging? No, we don't. What we do, we are recovering the debts from the past. And, it's again about a relationship with the Jamaat, yeah? So 10 years ago, we had blame games, yeah? Mistrust, lots of issues, complaints. Today, we believe that mainstream of the Jamaat look at that Pamir Energy as their own company or their own projects. And let me give you the example. In 2015, you might heard we had a very unusual hot weather, which created lots of flooding and mud flows around the region. That year, we lost 5 of our power plants. We have 11, we lost 5 of them. And actually, it also hit our 2 major power plants. And Harog was without electricity for 3 days. The entire region was without electricity 1 week. First time when we did the assessment of the impact, many experts said that it will take us almost 4 months to fix it. It took us 1 week to fix it. Why? Because every day, over 300 volunteers from the Jamaat were next to us, and they're helping us to resolve it. In the you please understand that every evening when I came back to Harog and the old town without electricity, that was the toughest time in my life. There were other days also, but in 7 days, no single community member came and insulted us, and they had the rights to do it, but they didn't. In fact, they came with us and they resolved the problem in 1 week rather than 7 weeks. So what happened at that time, it's not only they help us, but 46 of those 300 every day put their life in gender, and there was only one way to get the conductors, the lines from one point to the other point. They have done it. They've finished. They moved out, and after 25 minutes, another massive mud flow came. So wow. If we were late by 25 minutes, 46 of the Jamaat members went down. What I'm trying to say is that it was very important to that how the Jamaat perceives it, and this is, I think, a true example of this one. We do meet all our operational costs. We do meet our financial liabilities as well. In fact, we work with the community and we do many social projects. It can go providing the drinking water to the communities or establish sport field for the communities. But of course, what we are proud of today, every single child of first to fourth grade in Harog and in Shugnan have access to attend the chess classes, and those are fully sponsored by Pamir Energy. This is how we try to promote the intellectual development of the children. And we do lots of social activities as well. And I think that model is at least it's helping to provide electricity in a quite a sustainable way. And we didn't stop just in East Tajikistan. This model we have been now replicating in Afghanistan since 2008. It's only 4%. I agree it's a very low space. We have to be more quick on this one, but we have a model. And we have recently started to implement those activities in the North Pakistan as well.
Tell us a little bit about Afghanistan, because in 2008, I mean, for those who haven't been there, you've got Gorno-Badakhshan on one side of the river, and literally across the river, which in some places is like looking across the street, is Afghanistan. And you can see villages, you see people tending their farms, and in 2008, you looked across and saw what?
Oh, indeed, it was, the difference is only 300 meters. We discussed about the stereotype. We also had the stereotypes towards Afghanistan. The first time I went there in 2007, I was 33 years old at that time. Don't count how old I'm today. You know, I went there, I'm guilty, with lots of stereotypes. What really struck me is that I saw so much commonalities than the differences, yeah? So there might be few differences, but in most of the cases it was the same people, the same language, the same culture, the same faith, the same body language, the same looking, everything the same. And I even find out my relatives there. This is what struck me. And it's 300 meters, but it's, in terms of development, huge difference. The difference, if you can compare the Western world, the developed world and the developing world, it was that difference at that time. Life was very tough, really, at that times. And however, you know, the export of electricity into Afghanistan only represents 3% of our total revenue. We never look at this as a business, even though we brought the private sector discipline. But whatever we do, we have our social heart, but we have our entrepreneur mind. We have to make things work in that environment in a sustainable way. Today, 4 districts have been covered, like electrified. And it's a fact that those 4 districts are not affected by extremism, the Taliban's. Even today, you might know that the situation on the border is difficult in an area called Ishkashim. This is where we have been working for several years. And you find the resistance there. So the Taliban took over some of the districts in these areas very quickly, but somehow they have been struggling with this region. And we believe that one of the reasons that because both government of Tajikistan, government of Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, and AKDN, as such, brought the basic services to those areas. Once you have electricity, education, health, you know, people have tendency to resist in order to keep those things. And this is what we have been seeing. We have been working in Afghanistan for the last 9 years, and we spent $0 for security. Because our security is the people. It's the ownership of the community towards the projects that make us comfortable. They have been involved from day one. We consult with them. We involve them into the construction. By the time we leave, the community generously thinks that it's owned by them. Mm-hmm. And you certainly can make big projects and go all the way to the major cities. But what is important is the social impact of that community. I do recall a couple years ago, we had normal things. We do the construction projects, and we were reported that there's unrest about 60 kilometers from the border. The Taliban became active. The first things we did, I requested to withdraw the construction team. After 3 hours, my colleague called me and said that, look, the Shuro, the community leaders are here. They want to talk to you. So it's very easy. I mean, it's a matter of 30 minutes you're on the Afghan side. I went there, and the community leaders actually convinced us that even though there's security stations, but the community will make sure that nobody of the construction team will be disturbed. And fortunately, we didn't stop, and fortunately, nothing happened with us. Afghanistan, we have lots of stereotypes about this one, but if you go there, and I go there 6 to 8 times, in fact, this is the land of opportunities. There's very creative people, very hardworking people, and it's really to bring to appreciate the local know-how, to develop it, Let me give you the example. A couple years ago, we were in a place called Bahorek. It's not far from Faizabad, which is the biggest town of Afghan Badakhshan. And there, over the night, we had a dinner, and the community leaders came there. And there, they figure out who we are, and they appreciated what we have been doing on the border. But one of the leaders told me that, you know, you guys are doing well on the border, but you're very slow coming into Afghanistan. So, you know, as a Harvard alumni, I tried to explain him the whole project cycle, and I see the gentleman doesn't buy it. So I said, let me use one more card. I said that, uncle, but you should understand that there's a security issues. And he said something to me that really changed our approach as a Pamir Energy. He said that if you bring the energy, you will bring the security. So we go to the tough areas. We certainly have to appreciate the environment. We have to make sure that the community understand it. There's a political sensitivities that's given. We have to deal with this one. But at the same time, when you work with the people in time of need, that's completely changed the times. Let me give you another example. So this is we go. We don't hesitate. We don't say that, oh, is it safe or not? We just go there. Of course, ACAD and well represented there. AKF, all the other agencies are there with us. We are not alone there. But so what we also have been doing, we find out that the extremes normally in the remote areas, there's no road, no bridge, no schools, no basic health services. We have started to walk in the villages where there's no road, no bridge. We do manually. We get it, we cross over the Panj River, we do use helicopters. Because what we believe that if we will bring the electricity first, it's a connectivities, yeah? So you somehow connect physically the remotest area into the so-called civilization. This is first. The second thing, from the academic perspective, guess, if you have electricity in the most remote area, building bridges, schools, clinics becomes much cheaper, more affordable. Because otherwise, you know, if there's no electricity, you have been doing it one. So we believe that in Afghanistan we gain a lot of experience, and what we are proud today, the 4 districts that I mentioned, 100% run by locals. Our shareholders, and it's a Maulana Azman vision, is to build the local capacity. And this is what we have been doing. And this is what's happening in Afghanistan. So if you look at East Tajikistan, in terms of environment and geography, it's the same as North Afghanistan and North Pakistan. So the question is, if these things worked in East Tajikistan, where today 96% of the people have an uninterrupted power supply with affordable price in a sustainable way, why not we can replicate it? It's possible, it's just a matter of techniques. It's our mission and vision to bring light and warmth to each household of Badakhshan. And we will go for that 4% that is missing. But it's really now time to upscale it and not to wait for the right time. There's no right time.
Well, Deller, thank you very much. I have a few more questions, but I should let some people here ask questions.
Thank you for a very interesting thing. When there's a shortage of anything in this world, they always come up with innovative ways of solving the problem. Now, looking at your literature, most of your energy is from hydro projects. So the question is, hand in hand with what you are producing. Have you ever thought of encouraging these countries to look at solar system, wind power? And at the moment it's a bit immature for those countries, but if you have a look at the future innovations, like the one they are experimenting in Los Angeles, they are going to put strips on the road, and every time a car passes over them, it produces electricity that will power those lights.
Well, Daler, tell us a little bit about some of the innovations you have done, but also answer the question about whether you've been looking at solar and wind in addition to water, and maybe why water.
And can I also ask you that I was very glad to know that these 300 volunteers have put up such a wonderful work, and then after a few days, you have another disaster. Looking at AKF and Focus, I have thought that these two organizations have got ample experience in earthquake and disaster management, building resilient buildings. So why are these things put in such a sport where you are inviting these disasters?
Great.
Tell us about also how you work with Focus and AKF in that regard.
Oh, absolutely. No, thank very much for the question. Indeed, we are in 100% of hydro business. We welcome innovations, and those innovations could be, simple things. Today, all our billing systems online, and we send all our bills through the mobile phones. And it takes 1 minute to do the meter reading, and this goes to here. I mean, your utility companies in UK, they are very spoiled. They are very bold. I wish I could be them, because in Tajikistan we have to do it every month, the physical meter reading of this one. And in the past it took 15 days. Today it's a matter of 2 days. So that transparency, the technology is there. We also use the metering data acquisition systems, which actually remotely give us exact figures every 30 minutes, what's happening with our generation and transmission. Inshallah, this year, we're going to put the control systems, which is actually, we will manage 4 of our major facilities remotely. It's kind of one-man control systems that we're going to go. So we do welcome it. On solar and wind, we have been looking at this one, and why we are not so advanced on this one, there's several reasons. One of the reasons is that we've been working in the areas where 97% of the territory is mountains. So socially, it's very difficult to allocate the remaining 3% of land for the solar. This is number one. Second, if you go to the mountains, you have to compromise with the outputs of those technologies. And third one, you are going into the disaster area, so that it makes expensive. Having said that one, and given that the technology, especially for solar, the prices are really going down, we are there. In fact, today we are developing, as Aga Khan Fund for Economical Development, we are developing a plan of 10 megawatt of solar in Tajikistan, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. So we certainly have been working on these things. And inshallah, maybe next year would be able to share with you one of our story where we will put a solar in one of them. I mentioned about the 4%, which we don't have the electricity yet because of the remoteness. In one of the villages, we're going to put that 100 kilowatt solar. So we are trying to gain the experience on that one. And we welcome the technologies. in terms of interacting with the Focus Humanitarian Assistance with AKF, it's called now the Aga Khan Agency for Habitat. The focus well represented in both in East Tajikistan and North Afghanistan. And I think the case that I mentioned, it was a 1,000 years event. So we had normally all our feasibility study, all our engineering disaster was based on 100 years event. And here you got a 1,000 years event. I think we should give lots of credit to the Focus Humanitarian Assistance, to the Aga Khan Foundations, because in that flooding, no Jamaati life was in danger. So and I think that was the most important. So the alarm systems, the awareness campaign was there. We have done it, and it was really massive at that time. We do work with Focus Humanitarian Assistance, and in fact, life's changing. We have a climate change. That climate change changed our approach, and together with it was Focus. Today it's called the Aga Khan Agency for Habitat. We are working what called the disaster risk reduction. So we became proactive. We did not wait for that 1,000 years event yet. We, together with the Focus, with our partners in Switzerland, who has one of the best practice in dealing with the disasters, where we have reviewed all our critical assets critically, and we actually identify proactively, okay, such events can happen. Those are the things we have to mitigate, to do in order to mitigate the impact of those hazards. But there are the cases we said that this is very big scales, we will lose it. So for this, what we have been doing, we are doing on redundancy. So if that event in 2015 hit two of our major power plants, which represents 90% of our capacity, this can happen again. The question is how we can be in safe side, at least to avoid again, humanitarian crisis. And for this, we have been developing a new projects well, again, for Hydra, for good reasons, but it could be in different value as a redundancy. Yeah. So there's a very close interactions with our sister agencies of AKDN. Yeah.
We have someone back here.
I'm a student of sociology, so I'm most interested in this relationship of development with indigenous community. And you mentioned about the term social mind. I'm just thinking aloud that, and it may be my misinterpretation of the narrative that you presented. In my own observation while studying societies and especially Ismaili community, there is a lot of social capital, respect and trust towards the AKDN of the community. And you mentioned the role of volunteers. You mentioned, the case of, the security, psychological and physical. I want to juxtapose this, that, sometimes do you feel, or maybe I have gotten this impression, that sometimes these social capital, which is a great asset, is reciprocated sometimes in a, differently. For example, when it came to recovery of the bills, what you narrated, there was a consumerist logic and language at play. So how you balance between social capital that is afforded to AKDN, and when it comes to economic benefit, the rules change. And sometimes consumerist law, pay the bill, recovery the bill, otherwise your connection will be disconnected. Do you see how it would affect the community psyche towards AKDN?
You had mentioned at lunch today work that you've done with some non-Ismaili communities, because of course there are non-Ismaili villages that you worked with on both sides, and it might be interesting to talk a little bit about that as well when you answer that.
Sure, no, thank you. Somebody asked me, what is your budget of the corporate social responsibility? I said it's 100% of our revenue. And it is. Whatever we do, it's about corporate social responsibility. We are really providing the social services into that respect. And we as a Pamir Energy have been working not only in the Jamaati areas, but in the non-Jamaati areas as well. So the base, the main expectations or approach towards the utilities, it's normal things. You guys are providing the services, you are the utility company, behave as a utility company. So when it comes to the services, in their mind is, we expect you to provide the 24 hours power supply per day. If there's issues, you better fix it. That's very much in it. When it comes to the paying the bills, that's I think that's the most difficult and most sensitive question, and the things we have been dealing. I think the way how we address it, again, we should make the distinguish between affordability and the willingness to pay. And the affordability today, 68% of the people have that support that they don't pay. And then you have the remaining who have affordability to pay, but the willingness of pay was not there. And how you do it? We do it mainly in three, I guess, directions. First of all, we have improved, and we will continue to improve the services. I think it's very important to have the electricity there. The second thing, it was about transparency. So many people ask, well, we want to pay, but we are not sure that how much you charge us. And this is, we have spent significant amount of money into the metering to bring the transparency. By the way, there was some of my colleagues were pushing hard us to spend it on other aspects. But we felt very strongly that the relationship with the community was very important. So we brought the transparency. This was called give less excuses to our customers not to pay. This one. The third one, you have to be tough in certain areas. And yes, 2008, we have disconnected 21% of our customers in order to meet our targets, in order to recover the bills. 21%. Today, it's about 7%. So that 7%, what we have been doing, one thing is you deal with 100%, another 7%. The 7%, we know them by names. We do. We do. We know their names.
Well, you should tell them about your collection agency, these ladies who go out and...
Yeah. And what we do, we literally go and we look what are the problems. And by the way, there's families who receive the customer support scheme or who might not, but they really have a low incomes. And because we know there's such families, and in the entire Gorno-Badakhshan, there are only 192 of them. What we have been working with 192, we look at them and we find out that it's really about the budgeting. Because, definition of the poverty is also different. So they said, oh, we cannot afford to pay. And I said, okay, aunt or uncle, dad or mother, tell me what's the other problem. You know what? My two kids study in the universities. We just got a loan from the bank and we just arranged marriage of my eldest son or daughter. And we only have that income. Therefore, we cannot do it. Of course, that's not definition of the poverty. With this family, we are very straightforward. We disconnect. We say that what we say to the community, first is bread. After the bread, please budget your electricity. And this 192 families, it's very interesting. They're really less fortunate. I mean, they really have issues with the income. But we learned that their consumption is not that high. So what we do with them, we say that, okay, let's work out and let's pay that amount in 6 months. By the way, the billing systems helps us to understand each of the customers, how much they consume. And that consumption, we identify, and we say that you will pay, and we'll tell them the amount we know that they have to pay every month. So we make them 6 months to pay that amount, and we say that for each that amount, we depends on the incomes, whether we double it, triple it, or we pay it 4 times. So let's say if they pay $2, we'll pay $8 for that one. In 6 months, we recover the debts. What is important, after the 6 months, they continue to pay that amount of money. So that's into this one. But again, by the end of the day, it's tough. It's tough to disconnect the people. It's not easy, this one, but you have to deliver the messages. By the end of the day, we have to collect our bills because we have other invoices to be paid. And this we are also tough, not only with the communities, but we are tough also with other non-residential customers who don't pay. And, you sometimes have to disconnect the entire entity, which is very important from security point of view or from the social point of view. I hope I...
Well, no, Deller, I mean, I think it's very rare that in a speech on development you hear anybody talk about being tough. Usually we're a charity and we're nice. But I think what's important about it actually is that it's about respect. And it's also about you have a social contract about providing a service, and you work with people in order to meet their obligations. And I think that that's what is important, and that's one of the things that is really true across AKDN. I mean, one of the things that is common across our various agencies is that nothing is just given away. Everybody has to make an effort. They have to volunteer, they have to pay. There has to be some participation. And I think that what you bring out, what you call toughness, is really also about generating a relationship of respect. And that's one of the things, at least for me, that comes out of your comments this evening. Now, we have...
and if you allow me something, I think another thing that I forgot to mention, it's about the campaign, the public campaign, the increasing of the awareness. And I think we should be very open and frank to the community, and this is what we do. We say that, okay, what is the alternative to electricity? And we give them the calculation. It's a coal, it's a candle, it's you go for the bio, resources such as wood. You spend 4 or 5 hours on collecting those things. So what we do every year, we print the materials and we share, and we actually give the options. And the options alternative to the electricity is biomass and other things, which is actually 8 times more expensive. It is our experience shows that people pay 6 times less for energy. And when I say energy, I'm not saying only electricity, but other things that are coming from that. 6 times less than the areas where there's no electricity.
Yeah.
For example, in the context of Badakhshan, and it can be cash and non-cash cost, yeah? And we are talking today about $96 they pay a month. The bills is today $77 a year, which is about $6.50 a month. So it's very important to give them the differences.
It's a big difference.
It's a huge difference.
We have time for one last question. We haven't allowed any women to ask questions tonight, but that's because they haven't raised their hand, and I have one here. And so, please.
Just going back to what you mentioned about the trees, having lost 70% of the forestry. Has any effort been made to replace that, to replanting?
Yeah. The last 10 years, those who have been visited, they noticed that Badakhshan became more greener. And I humbly believe it's because of the project. Normally, so the government, the community have been doing a lot for planting the trees. We see even those areas which lost most of their trees, they have been recovering. So we are doing it from the two perspectives. One is people use now less wood for cooking and heating. The second one, we are doing the planting. And by the way, we also as a company, as a part of our corporate social responsibility, sponsoring those campaigns so that to make the things greener. It's not only that we lost the 70%, but also important, normally it's our mothers, sisters, wives, daughters, and children who are going collecting the wood. And they have spent an average 4.5 hours. And by bringing the electricity, you are saving this 4.5 hours. If you ask me who are our best payers, guess what? It's people in Afghanistan. And I'm telling to my Tajik Jamaat, I said that, please, don't complain. Afghanistan is there. Their living condition is much more difficult. Their incomes is much less, but they pay their bills. And we did the study, and we find out that our champions are women. Why? Because that 4.5 hours savings give them, well, it's not only the 4.5 hours savings that then stop to go for 5 to 10 kilometers walking and collecting the wood, simply because what happens to the male? Don't think that we are lazy people. Most of us are left the areas for jobs in other regions or countries, so in order to support the family back home. And it also simplified the housekeeping in the houses. So actually the budget is with women, and they are one of the first ones who benefiting from it for this 4.5 hours. And they make sure that they pay the bills. By the way, in Afghanistan, what also we learned, the saving of 4 hours now promoting what we call the tea time, where in the afternoon, so between 1:30 and 5 o'clock, children are in schools or doing something, husbands and brothers or whoever they are also are out of the house. This is the time where ladies come together for the tea. So they start to socialize. And guess what? They're talking a lot about the electricity at that time also. So this is the reason that they pay the bills. And I'm amazed with another example. Actually, this tea party, it's
well,
tea party.
Different context for tea party in this, as an American, yes.
Yeah. The tea time.
Yes.
The tea time helped women in Shugnan to create their own enterprise, producing the Kashmirs. So it's really women empowerment makes us very proud of that project.
Well, I think that's a perfect way to, I'm sorry we don't have time for any more questions. I have somebody waving a sign at me saying you should have stopped 5 minutes ago.
This is what I tell to Matt. I said that I came from indirect speech culture, and the first 5 minutes we are just greeting.
Well, now we're going to say thank you. So thank you so much, Daler, really.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.